a formal welcome and comparing will be done by one Ms. Tauhita. She's a second PG student at QMC. Tauhita, you can take over.
Okay, ma'am.
Yes.
Good evening to everyone present here. On behalf of PG and Research Department of English, I will welcome you all to today's fortnightly symposium organized by the Intandem Research Club of Queen Mary's College. We are delighted to gather for the in Indian writing. Today's symposium topic connecting cultures, voices, and lived experiences across linguistic boundaries. Let us begin by invoking the spirit of knowledge, sharing uh, Dr. K. Srilata ma'am, Associate Professor, retired from Bharathi Women's College. She'll be speaking on the thought-provoking topic, the role of translation in promoting regional voices to a larger reading group. Ma'am, we are truly honored by your presence today. I request you to kindly address the gathering, ma'am.
Thank you, Tauhida and the team Tandem, for having me invited today to talk in your research club. Thank you so much. And okay, as you had said, I would be interested in talking about how translation plays a role in promoting regional voices to a larger reading group in general. Now, I think I'm addressing the PG students and some of the faculty here. So, to begin with, maybe before going into translation as such, the theory and the principles, we will just talk about how post coloniality or post colonial literatures have gained prominence and have acquired a niche in the global arena of creative experiences. This freedom of expression and the recognition gained there within has accommodated many new voices, as we all know, which began to flow freely, sans the rigid rules framed by the center, the Europe. The margin, as we realize, has slowly begun to move inward. The new voices, like the fresh dewdrops, carry the region's flavor, color, and the fragrance. It's not surprising if the local hues and aromas are traveling to different unknown lands and spaces. Literary works are the harvested produce that have to be displayed and sold out. English language as the first language of the world. Probably this was the reason which it was recognized as the platform, the stage upon which the regional works needed to be placed to perform, that is to be read and understood, to be going through the same experience that the regional readers have gone through. Now, translation studies, as we all know, have been the tool Translation forms the stage which transports languages, cultures, customs, practices. India, as we all know, the multicultural and multilingual nation, produces literary works from almost all the regions. Readers not familiar with the language no longer have any barriers because, as Tawhida had said, translations have formed this bridge to connect these gaps and connect people across culturally and linguistically different geographical regions. Now, today, research can be done rather easily using translated text to arrive at universal theories that art and expression seem to be similar. more or less, irrespective of climes or times. Now, with this, we all understand how translation studies is definitely an interdisciplinary field, a comparative field, interdisciplinary, which is connecting different disciplines, say arts or science or anything, even within arts, various disciplines also are being connected, examining, interpreting, and in recreating texts from one source into another or into many. This approach incorporates insights from various cultural and linguistic backgrounds or experiences. Theoretically speaking, there are four types of translations. They are creative, like how we have the texts, literary texts that have been created, art, painting, which have been created, and then technical, if you go to a lab, you will have various instructions being written. And then these instructions are also being translated for many people to understand what these are meant for. That help connect people across boundaries and borders regarding the field of science, regarding information in the field of science. And then you have the corporate type of translations, which happens in any business areas where people connect across borders through translations for various commercial purposes, business purposes. There are, again, when we talk about the different stages of translation, we come across four basic stages. For example, the first one being initiation. One second, I'll just check if I can connect the PowerPoint. Okay. Are you able to see this slide? Hello,
Yes, ma'am.
can you see this? Okay. So now we're moving on to the four stages of translation studies. Now, when we talk about initiation, it is what happens for a person when there is an urge to translate. For example, if you, this text has been written in Tamil by Bama, the Tamil writer. Now, for a non Tamil reader to understand what are the nuances, the problems, the pains that a particular group has been facing, and what are the cultural aspects, the traditions and customs of a particular group of people, it is for it has been made easy for the audiences by Lakshmi Armstrong, who had translated this text into English. So this English text now forms as the main text, connecting people, connecting cultures, connecting minds that tend to understand what exactly is has been happening in certain parts of the world. And another example that I would like to give is Gitanjali by Rabindranath Tagore. Now, we are a global nation, like India. We belong to the southern part where we may not know the Bangla language. So for people like us, Gitanjali in English serves to serve us with the great qualities and the richness of poetry that Tagore has poured into it. And then so this is the kind of initiation where the whatever stuck Lakshmi Armstrong or even Gitanjali even Tagore himself, who wanted to produce his text into English. And that urge to make the text or carry the text onto a different platform where not just the regional, but other people can also see, read, experience, and enjoy has been the objective of the initiation. And then for this, it is important that the translator has to have basic understanding of the language, the culture, the people. And for this, again, I would like to give an example of Rajan Krishnan. When she had written When the Kurinji Blooms, she had to literally stay in that tribal hilltops for nearly 13 years to understand the people, the tribal, the culture and traditions of the tribe, and the landscape, the environment, and everything to be part of them, and that speaks of the landscape. Happen one day, or you know, research work takes to arrive at a different part. So that initiation and then the actual work takes place. And then the termination is what we mean by the produce of the text. So when the text is created, the produced, and the process of and then the recycling. Translated and people and cultures to also read, understand, and enjoy at the same time. And when we talk about the methods that are used for translation, carry any soul of the within the word. It's just the meaning of the word that matters, and that is what word to word. And then literal translation, again, that's again the same thing. Literal translation, literally from one word to another, the message that has to be understood to other people. Like, for example, if you go into signal part, it's just a when an arrow points out to the left side, it means it's just a literal meaning. They say turn left. So that is enough for that kind of a translation. And faithful translation is one where the texts have to be translated from the source language into the target language, from the original into the targeted language, uh, as it is verbatim from whatever the source language contained, except for the language, the content, the spirit, the soul is translated from that is needed according to the target language. For example, if um, uh, from whatever research I had done, I just would like to give an example. I had done a translation of the Telugu works from a Telugu prose work into, compared it with the English spectator work of Addison and Steele, 18th century periodical essays. So when I began translating the Telugu text, because not many people know what the Telugu text is all about. Now, the Telugu text is written by Telugu writer like Panu Lakshmi Narasimha Rao, belonging to the colonial period India, where chance exposure to the British writings, he also felt like making an attempt to produce one such in his mother tongue form. And there, I mean, the content is definitely not the same. The form could be the same. He attempted to write essay in Telugu. Essay is a form that is not an Indian form of writing, in the Indian literary form of writing. Essay is one of the prominent, foremost. Telugu writer had attempted to produce essays in Telugu, but then the content definitely changed, because the Joseph and Richard Steele, Addison and Richard Steele, took to periodical essays to change the manners and style of the English men and women. So they were more like reformatory, correcting the English men and women, and they were hardly 1 or 2 pages. But here in Telugu, this writer began to write during the freedom struggle in India. So the some essays were more about how to arouse the Indian audience to kind of come out of slumber and join the national movement and so on. So this is a kind of an adaptation that the Telugu writer wanted to make, and at the same time, he also used the form that the British writers had already um, experimented successfully with. So it is now the British writers were no more living when the Telugu writer began his writing. So there was no necessity for him to get a kind of a permission or any kind of legal permission to um, change or alter certain things. He just merely used the form to demands of his times and society. Okay. And then free translation is one method where you could just translate, like you just have to follow this rule, you cannot change, you cannot use anything and all that. And for example, see, when Rajam Krishna's Lamps in the Whirlpool is another brilliant example, where Rajam Krishnan, in her Tamil Lamps in the Whirlpool, which had been translated by Lakshmi, and in the English translated work, you find certain cultural words which do not have equivalence in the English. Like this is a cultural problem that the translator come across. And what these translators had attempted is, even in Bama's Karku or Lamps in the Whirlpool, the like for example, in Bama's Karku, Annan, Bama refers to her brother as Annan, and in the English text, Annan was a word that had been carried out. And obviously, there would be footnotes to explain to the non-native readers of what this term is, cultural term actually means. Why then these cultural terms have been had to be used? And in Rajam Krishnan's Lamps in the Whirlpool, Mamiyar, Madikol were some of the cultural words that had been used in the English translated work, of course, with the footnotes. Then why do you have to use these cultural words without translating? Is one thing is, you do not find equivalences in the target language for the cultural and other various variations. And another thing is, the translator would have um, found out that this regional word, the language in the source language word, has more soul or power or spirit in it, which will not which will get lost in a probably different word or a different equivalent that would help the non-native readers understand within, if it is incorporated within the text. So these kind of words, which carry the soul of that land, that language, that culture, are also being used in the target language, with, of course, the footnotes, for the reason that I had mentioned, that the spirit of that word should not get lost. And um, okay. Idiomatic is mm, some of the idioms that cannot be translated are sometimes translated or given in the target language in the same as in the source language, again because you cannot find equivalences there. um, for example, make hay while the sun shines. When you tell it in the Tamil, காற்றுள்ள போதே தூற்றுக்கள். So somewhere you feel there is, um, the same punch is missing, but you get the meaning, of course. Okay, so this is a kind of a thing. And the communicative translation method. So this is CTM, which has been widely used. The communicative translative method is when you try to speak something, the other person should understand. That is the meaning of communication from the one person to another. And you could use gestures, you could use broken sentences and all that. The purpose is you should be communicable. Okay. And then when we talk about the seven procedures of translation, you have what you call as the borrowing. And borrowing is what you borrow from other languages, like how these examples I told you, kark and um, lamps in the whirlpool. And then calc is again a kind of it means it's a loan translation. For example, when you say I'm traveling by bus, na busla poren. So நான் பஸ்ல போறேன். So this bus is not your regional language. So you just take loan from other. Bouquet. So we present a bouquet. And then bouquet, cafe, cuisine. So these are all loan words that are used in translation. So when you go to a stall to eat, you find this a cafe and the board, and then you find multi cuisines. So these are all certain calc, what you understand by this calc. And then literal translation again, as we discussed in the above thing. Transposition is when you post from one into another. You transfer, then it becomes transposition. You transfer the culture, you transfer the meaning, you transfer the content, you transfer the essence of it. And then modulation. Of course, you can do some kind of modulation, some alterations in the text, like the one that I told you from my research work. Equivalence. Equivalence is finding equivalent word. For example, in Rajam Krishnan's Lamps in the Whirlpool, she uses the word mamiyar. You can always have the equivalent mother-in-law. Okay. But then that was the choice of the translator to not use the English word. But then there is another word called muddy coal in Rajam Krishnan's Lamps in the Whirlpool. What is it you understand by the word muddy coal? Muddy coal is, this happens in the upper caste um, homes, where they use a stick, say a bamboo stick or something, to dry cloths you that are used only for traditional uh, prayer purposes, where the women at the home wear such cloths while they do their prayers, while they do their morning cooking and all that. And then they use the stick to remove the cloth from the line, and then they use the same stick to put the cloth back into the line, so that nobody touches this. So that's a kind of a tradition that they follow. So this muddy coal is a term which does not have an equivalent in the English language, in the British culture. Their culture does not accommodate or allow such a thing. So what and then is the solution? So here the muddy coal term is used in the English translated work, and there is an explanation given in the form of a footnote. So that solves the problem. Okay. And adaptation. Adaptations is, for example, when you see from the text that I had done, the Telugu text that I wanted to translate into English, I had to do some adaptations because the writer had not used the content that Addison and Steele have used. The writer had himself adapted to various the other themes or contents that were of the current use then. So that was the adaptation that the writer did, and that is what I had to do when I had to translate that content into English. Okay, so this is allowed in translation. You can adapt, you can make certain changes if you want to, if that permits. Okay, then when it comes to the methods of translation, I think theoretically you must have come across these things. Human translation, what we do as translators. The role of a translator is to translate content from one text into another, from one source into another target. So the medium is the human who has the ability, who has the knowledge of cultures, of languages, who has the skills of writing and reading, who uses all these skills and whatever he or she had acquired and delivers into the target language. So that's one. And machine translated is when you talk about the AI today, how much of this AI has been used, how much of the machine translation has been used. For example, if you today there are so many tools, you go to the Google and give a term and ask it for a Tamil translation, or give a Tamil word and ask it for an English translation. In no time, you get the word in the what language that you wanted to. So the machines are also being used in as a tool in translations to help you understand, to help you go at the process of translation much easily. And then post edited. Post edited, by post edition, what we mean is once the text is translated, you could you could go in for corrections. You feel there are certain things that are unwanted, there are certain things that have to be added, so the additions and deletions can be um, done in this post editor. There is also one method called pre-editing, preparing. Pre-editing is preparing the source language text. For example, you read the source language text, you understand the language, you understand the culture, you understand the geography, you study the author and you study other works of the author, and you arrive at a proper understanding of the text and the surrounding information that is important for you to go in for a translation of this. Because, for example, again, if I have to say Rajam Krishnan, why is this term Mamyar and Madikol, or why is this term Annan used by in Bama's translated work is, you have to not only read Bama's Karku, you have to go back to Bama's culture, you have to go back to Bama's geography, you have to understand what why this term forms such a pivotal place in that, in her life, in her text, and so on. And then you understand why this text can be incorporated or transported into the target language. So much has to be studied before going into the before beginning or initiation. So this is pre-editing. And I told you post-editing is again is the process of correction, where you still have, where before the book goes into the hands of the publisher, you have a lot of time to go into the editing and check if there is anything problematic, or if it is okay if to be published. Okay, so these are the things. And what are the basic principles? Hello, tandem team. Do I have time? Can I continue?
Yes,
Yes,
ma'am.
madam. Yes, yes.
Okay. I hope I'm clear to the girls over there.
Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am.
Okay. And then basic principles of translation, which all of us which are the basic rules for any kind of translation is accuracy. Accuracy is you have to be perfectly closer to the source language, original text. You have to be very, very clear and accurate to the the connotations that are there, the whatever has been carried out in the text. The text is a kind of a source which carries the language, the culture, the geography, the landscape, the soul, everything. So everything in totality has to be transferred or transported accurately. The translator cannot make mistakes or cannot chance to alter any of these and bring in his or her own opinions or ideas into somebody else's geography or landscape or culture. Everything has to go as it is, and this is what we understand by the accuracy. Fluency, again, as I told you, when the translator goes into the pre-editing process, everything has to be understood. The text and the surrounding, the context. The text and the context have to be completely grasped by the translator so that it flows like a stream in their mind when it comes to translating, when it comes to transporting. It should flow like a stream, uninterrupted. When will this happen? Only when you are thorough with everything. It's not just sufficient if you read the text and understand the context. No, the text and the context is very, very important according to the old theory of the classical theories. Then the context is equally important when you look at T.S. Eliot's critical theories. You understand why he places so much importance to the context, because daffodils. You can't place the daffodils in an Indian situation and understand Wordsworth. When he says 10,000 saw I at one glance, we don't see. So you have to go to that landscape, that geography, that context, and place the text in that context and understand it from that contextual perspective. You can't remove that daffodils from that context and make the children understand, oh, what these yellow flowers are. You could give a lot of pictures and illustrations, but the text belongs to that context. So that's very, very important. So this, the translator has to, the translator has to completely, uh, um, you know, uh, understand this, and then his or her role as a translator, bring all these aspects from that context only. So that is the kind of honesty or that the translator has to carry into the process of his translation. Okay, when he adapt with all these informations, fluency flows automatically. And when that fluency comes, it should he or she will all also be transported into that context. So from that base, he can produce his translations. Okay, and okay, what are the skills that are required for translation? No, I may be repeating this. This is just to reinstate, because these are some of the basic things that are very essential for a translator to carry on. The translator has to have a strong written communication, because you are reproducing the text from one medium into another medium. So you are the translator has to be good and adept in both the mediums. Okay, so that's very important. The written communication has to be very strong. And then as I said earlier, the translator must definitely have a deep understanding of that source language culture. Again, to cite the same example, why I told you why Rajam Krishnan chose to go to those blue flower hills and the Kurinji hills, where that blue flower blooms once in 12 years. Would not have been able to experience or feel that emotion or carry the same kind of warmth or fragrance. So that is the kind of involvement that the translator has to take to understand and taste that soil, which could require elongation, longer periods of time. And then honing a sound translation judgment. Yeah, honing is understanding, a sound translation judgment. The translation plays a very crucial role in promoting text, in promoting writers, and then it is a very important to translate the Shakespeare's text into German language. And once the Shakespeare's text landed into Germany, it appeared as if Shakespeare was a German. So that was the extent towards which the translator had taken to transport Shakespeare onto his land, onto his geography. So this is the kind of sincerity. And for this, definitely the language skills are the fundamental requirements. Okay, then in earlier period, the translation was the metaphrase was the word that was used for translation, and metaphrase, the opposite of metaphrase is paraphrase. Okay, see, for example, if you go back to Spencer and Dunn's language, we cannot understand the text without the metaphrase. So the text will be on one side, the metaphrase will be on the other side. So word to word meaning explanation is given. That explanation only helps us to understand what Spencer or Donne, because that was Old English, which we cannot easily decipher. So that is the metaphrase was the word which was originally earlier used for translations. Um, there are four main types of translation. This is to just sum up. This is to just sum up what I have been talking to you all this while. Then I spoke to you about literary translation. What we understand is the translation that happens in the form of books, poetry, or drama, or any creative writing. So this in the field of literature, what we call as literary translations. And then I also spoke about technical translation, what you have when you buy a fridge or a washing machine, they give you user manuals. And when you buy a inverter, they give us safety protocols, how to use it. So these user manuals explain to us how we need to use certain products, and they don't go by grammar or honesty or sincerity and all that stuff. It just means some kind of a um, an understanding of certain uses, what happens in the field of science. So for example, if you go to a lab, you will find instructions to turn on the um, tap, to turn on the funnel, to add 2 ml of this, to mix with another thing, to you get this. So these are all certain things that are kind of instructions which don't basically need grammar or any kind of being loyal to whatever. It's just the content that's being transported into another medium for people to understand the process and the procedure to take place correctly. Okay, that is um, technical translation. And another thing that we all commonly know is the legal translation. See, when you go to the court, they have a different language system, legal language. Contracts are being made, the bonds are being made. When you see, even if you have a document, you will understand that that language is totally different. So the court documents, if you have a house, you have a document or whatever, that will, you go through it once, you will understand that it is something where the language is different, and that is required for a legal translation. That much is required, and that is sufficient. Patents, to acquire patents and legislations. And then medical translations. Clinical, when you go to a doctor, they give you a prescription. There are many times where only God can understand what that prescription is all about. But you take it to a pharmacy, he or she, the pharmacist understands. So that's the kind of a thing. Then they understand and they give you the medicine, whatever they. Then the trials that take place in, see, the in the hospitals, you have wards, and you have each of next to each of the in hospital wards, you have beds, you have what do you call as the writing pads. There will be notes in it, that there will be kind of it is all about the information about the patient, the problems, what has been diagnosed, what drugs are given, what clinical process has been happening, and all that. All these, they don't require basic grammar rules. They only require contents or matter that is being transported or written over there. The drug labeling, whatever medicine that has been given, that the label, the names are written. And then the research papers in the medical field. So these are all different. In the field of law, if you take a research paper, it is different from a literature paper that's written. We go by texts, we explain through texts, we use theories to support our discussion, presentation. In the case of a legal paper, they have a lot of case studies. They have a lot of cases that come in the court, Supreme Court judgments, the High Court judgments, and all that. Those case laws are taken, and the matter is explained therein. So that's a different procedure. So every field has its own way of writing, has its own way of translating. So it differs. So that we have all these types of translation. And I hope I was clear. I hope I made some sense to you people over there. Hello?
Yes, ma'am.
That
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. Okay. Now coming back to you.
Thank you, ma'am. That was
Yeah.
an insightful and enriching talk. Your reflections truly illuminated us how translation amplifies and widens literary horizons.
Okay.
Now, it is my pleasure to introduce our second keynote speaker, Sharon Alice Christy, ma'am, Assistant Professor, Department of English, Lady Doak College. She'll be presenting on Poetics of Resistance in South Indian Literature and Translation, with the focus on a century of political philosophy in songs of cover from Periyaar to Perumal to Murugan. Ma'am, we eagerly look forward to your address. Kindly take over the session, ma'am.
Thank you, ma'am, for the introduction. And it's a good day for me to be sharing this time with you. I'm very happy to share whatever little I know with you. And Perumal Murugan is a person who's by no means unfamiliar to any of us, but his works have a strange appeal that that has always fascinated me, and I've tried to find out where this appeal stems from. And in fact, I'm doing my PhD on the works of Perumal Murugan, and that's when I came across his Songs of a Coward. It was written in 2017, and when I came across this poetry collection, I thought that it was a very layered and nuanced work. So that is why I chose it as a topic of discussion. So I'll begin my session, and if you'd ever like to contribute or to stop me anywhere or to ask anything, please feel free to do so. So the topic is Poetics of Resistance in South Indian Literature in Translation, and I'll be sharing from my PPT. So here it is. Um, am I audible?
Yes, ma'am, you're audible.
Okay. So we all know that Perumal Murugan, he's a contemporary writer, and in 2023, his novel, in fact, his novel Pyre was shortlisted for the International Booker Prize, and he's written more than 12 novels and 6 collections of short stories and 6 anthologies of poetry. These are all things that we are familiar with. But what we are concerned with right now is what happened in the year 2014, where he faced intense backlash. And in fact, it was the controversy that shot him into the limelight. In the year 2015, he faced a lot of backlash for his work, One Part Woman, Madhurubagan, because in this work, he depicts a semi historical, a semi literary ritual that takes place within that particular region. It's a socially sanctioned mating ritual intended to conceive children outside of wedlock. And Perumal Murugan still claims that this is an actual historical practice and that he did not defame anyone while depicting this. But it was this particular depiction that created this controversy. So after this, after the intense backlash that he received, after the numerous death threats and the abuse, and I cannot even imagine what else, he declared himself dead. In the year 2015, he proclaimed himself dead and he underwent a metaphorical death as a writer. And in fact, he wrote on Facebook in 2015, he said, Perumal Murugan, the writer, is dead. As he is not God, he is not going to resurrect himself. He has no faith in rebirth. An ordinary teacher, he will live as P. Murugan. So this is something that he wrote, and for a year at least, he there was not much. He did not make much of a peep, and it was a very saddening time for writers and readers. And in 2016, after a successful verdict came out overturning the accusations against him, he wrote again after his exile. And the first work that he published after his exile was this one, Songs of a Coward, and it's called Poems of Exile. And this is a very interesting piece because on one hand, you might think that it shows a person who feels, who's full of self pity, a very beleaguered person, and it expresses a lot of self-pity. But you also find that there are many undercurrents to his work. And in fact, I think a part of what makes Perumal Murugan so fascinating to our times is this undercurrent, the very strong and ever present undercurrent of politics and philosophy. So this is something, that sets apart South Asian literature, South Indian literature from other kinds of literature. And feel free to contradict me on this, but this is what I feel. Writers like O.V. Vijayan or K.R. Meera or Perumal Murugan have been continuously raising their voices as resistance. Literature as resistance is a unique tradition that we can find in South Indian context. And if we look at the tone of this work, it's it is very deceptively self-pitying. So you might read the first few poems and think and be dismissive of it. Oh, it's so self-pitying and it's so bitter and despondent. But there is a lot of layers to unpack in his work, which is what I hope to be doing in this session today. And we know that there has been a very unique tradition in Tamil Nadu, in the Tamil context, and in the South Indian context. We've had this unique tradition of politics and literature, and of a tradition that is very unique from the rest of India, whereby resistance is a key part of culture. I feel that resistance literature has always been a part of our tradition, and we have a lot of philosophical influences. When we have a lot of influences for this, most notably there is E.V. Ramasamy, whom we all commonly call Periyaar. Then there is Annadurai, then there is Karunanidhi, and there are several others, but we will not go into that at the moment. So I've tried to categorize his work, and I find that it falls under four main heads. So, right. So there are four main heads. I think this is the four main categories that I find in his work. There may be more. There is this feeling of anti-establishment, this anti-establishment sentiment, or this disestablishmentarianism is something that we find, a vein of that runs throughout his work. Then there is this literary atheism, which always seems like a key theme. And then there is a passion for language that is, even if it is not overt, you find that it is again ever present in his works. So I've tried to call out poems that show all of these different categories. And for the first one, this feeling of this idea of questioning establishment, this idea of questioning authority figures, this idea of displaying wariness towards authority figures. It seems self-pitying again. It's not like the resistance of, say, for instance, Karunanidhi. It's not like the resistance of Annadurai. It seems very self-pitying, but it's quietly dignified and it's quietly resistant. And it shows a awareness towards authority in general. So this was one of the poems that I took for today's presentation, The Spider's Target. The spider has woven its web like a banner, stretching from a tree on one side to a tree on the other side of a wide path. No one knows which corner, which weave, how big, how small. In fact, the spider is not there at all. It does not live in its web, but its eyes keep watch from somewhere. Many who cross the road in broad daylight don't seem to notice the web. If they looked carefully in the evening, they might see it in the stir of its thread. But who has the time? Small bugs, little insects, beetles, butterflies, dragonflies. There are many that get caught, struggle, and die in the web. From somewhere, the spider's eyes observe everything. The spider is not going to emerge for now. Its target is bigger, very big, bigger than the biggest, a human hand. So this is a very I would say this is a poem that has a lot of layers, and it's very nuanced in its discussion of there's this feeling that big brother is watching you. There is this feeling that someone is controlling your thoughts, like the thought police, like the Orwellian thought police. And we see that the spider is very representative of authority here. And this kind of disestablishmentarianism, it emerges through poems like this. And then this is a much more overt poem. I won't read out all of it. A full body shave. The king has decreed that humans shall be skinned alive. They dig out old, blunt, broken shaving knives. Those who have managed to obtain knives are running around screaming. And we find that, in this particular context, there is a king, and this king has decided to scrape off the skin of artists and children. It's a very disturbing poem, and if we start to unpack the actual meaning behind this poem, if we start to unpack the actual layers of the poem, I think that would become a very dangerous task indeed. But I think we can all read it for ourselves. And the artists stand dripping blood from searing wounds and pretending that they are getting a full body shave. So, this idea of censor, Perumal Murugan once said that there was a censor within him. After the controversy that he faced during during the time of One Part Woman, after that controversy, there was a censor within him. And this is something that he keeps talking about, how he is no longer able to write freely, and he keeps coming up with very novel methods of dealing with this censor. And sometimes he uses things like allegories, like George Orwell in his Animal Farm. In Punachi, he uses allegories, and he uses symbols, and he uses animals to represent what's happening in the real world around him. And we see that this idea of being censored for everything that you say or you do, that is an ever present concern in his work. And you see that there's also a sense of literary artistic rebellion, where he feels that he is being targeted for his artistic sensibilities, because he feels that writers are apart from others. Their ideas are different, and the way they express themselves, that is different, and that itself becomes a threat. So this artistic suppression is something that he talks about in a lot of his works. Again, something that he shares in common with the philosophers, the great philosophers of the last century. A strange beast. My very existence becomes a threat to anyone I meet. As soon as I enter, they close doors and windows. As soon as they see me, they hurriedly send away their guests. They drift away from my words and look anxiously around. They fall silent. They make plans to send me away quickly. They text from their cell phones under the table, informing God knows who about my visit. They take photos with me and leave. They try to make a rare wonder of my voice. Someone has painted over my head a pair of horns everyone can see. Someone has turned me into a strange beast. So this artistic suppression and this kind of artistic ostracization is something that he talks about. He feels conspicuous as an artist because the freedom that is offered to others is not offered to him, and his words are often they are taken at face value, and often the most simplest of words, new meanings are derived from them. And he continually talks about this kind of artistic exclusion, about how artists are not treated with respect. And this is something we find in a lot of works, like Kalinga's, like Karunanidhi's works, where the artist does not get the kind of respect that they might get in other places, the kind of freedom, the kind of expression that they might get in other places. And coming to the language part, it is very, very understandable for someone whose language is as rich as Perumal Murugan to talk about language, but he does it in a very different way. It's not language itself that occupies his mind. It is the idea of having such a rich language, but still not being able to express himself. So that is something that we see in this particular poem, this love for language, this passion for his mother tongue, for the Tamil language. It is older than even sand and stone. It is a battery that has showed 2,000, 3,000, 4,000, 5,000 years of words and keeps aglow its literary flame. A political, classical language, refined by alternating times of light and dark. An immense language of 500,000 words, but in my language, silence squats firmly in all those places meant for my words. So we see how deeply he cherishes his language and how dear he holds it. This love for language, it permeates his works, and you find that he's always searching for the right word, the choicest word, even though if it is a very common word. We all know Perumal, like Thomas Hardy, he is adept at the art of using local language, dialects to convey his literature. But we find throughout, even when he's using, might seem like coarse language, we see that a love for language permeates his work, and his need to find the right word is something that we see throughout his works. And I think that comes from, again, it comes from the thinkers of our times, the thinkers that I already mentioned before. And now atheism, that's a it's a very huge part of his works. It's again not very overt at all times. I would like to read out a quote from Periyaar. I hope everyone here understands Tamil. I'll try to translate it. I know I'm just following up on a session on translation. I don't know what kind of translation this is, but I'll try to translate it once I read out this these Tamil lines. பிச்சைக்காரனுக்கு சோறு போடுவது நாஸ்திகமே ஆகும். ஏனெனில் கடவுள் பார்த்து அவனது கர்மத்திற்காக பட்டினி போட்டிருக்கும் போது நாம் அவனுக்கு சோறு போடுவது கடவுளுக்கு விரோதமான செயல். So this is to say how if we give alms to a, then that means that we are atheists, because by giving alms to a beggar whom God has decreed must starve and suffer, we are thwarting his will. In that sense, we are all atheists. That's what Periyaar says, and he says it in a very humorous and very sarcastic manner. But we see something very similar in Perumal Murugan's work also. The atheist, with the fervor and relish of hurling the worst insult at me, someone said, "You are an atheist." Yes, even God knows that. So you see that this very readily to Perumal Murugan, and you see that he's following in the canon, in the footsteps, metaphorical footsteps of the great thinkers before him. And then there are his miscellaneous poems, the other poems, which are very, very interesting to say the least. There is a poem about a man of culture. It's called A Man of Culture. I will not read out all the poems for paucity of time. There's a poem called A Man of Culture, where a man wants a cup of tea from his wife who is sleeping. Now, he doesn't want to wake her because a man of culture won't do that. A man of culture knows that it is wrong to wake up a woman and to ask her to make tea. But instead, what he does is he goes about the house slamming doors, letting things clatter as if they have fallen by accident. And he stumbles into tables and he shuts windows noisily, all this in the hope of waking up his wife. And we see that it's a very whimsical poem, but we see that there is a lot of commentary behind it, and there is even feminist discourse in the poem. And I'll end with one last poem, and it's a very interesting one. I'll read it out for you. I didn't learn a thing. That's what the poem is titled. I didn't learn a thing from my colleague who sat right next to me at work. He was ready to teach me everything. He gestured to me many times to simply follow him, but I declined without even a consideration. He was my senior in the office. No need to do any work. If necessary, we can pretend to be working. We need to be cordial to everyone, be ready to lick anyone's feet. These were the mottos he imparted to me. Those who do nothing face no problems. Unambitious people get to enjoy life. When it came out in the open that he misbehaved with a woman, the union rushed to his rescue. He had never taken part in protests, fasts, slogans, or strikes, but he paid his membership dues diligently, a silent member. And I'm skipping ahead. He was meticulous. He knew all the expiry dates, but he'd still check everything on the first of every month. He'd update things tirelessly, change even the smallest details. Voter ID alone, he corrected 20 times. He'd even say that his card was the only correct one in the country. He was the first one in our town to get an Aadhaar card. He said that they issued them then only in the post office. He paid his electricity bill on time and reminded me after the due date. He was the first one to receive any notification that the state sent out to its citizens. He never ever failed to pay any tax, any fee on time. I didn't learn anything from him. He was willing to be my guru and show me the way, but I let go of the chance to be a model citizen. And you see that it's kind of dripping with sarcasm, but we see that it sounds strangely familiar. When I read this, it sounded very familiar to me for some reason, and then it was then that I remembered Bharati's poem, Tedi Chor Nidam Tindru. If you don't know the poem, please go and look it up. I don't have it right now, and I don't want to take up more time by reading out the poem, but we find that the works of Perumal Murugan, they are colored with a lot of political and philosophical thoughts, and we see that it is entrenched with the thinking of with a very unique way of thinking, where resistance becomes literature and literature becomes resistance. And I think this is something that makes his works very special, and maybe that is why it appeals and it has such a wide appeal. So these are all the influences that I have seen in his works. So I hope this session was useful for you. And with that, I'll end my session. And if you have any doubts, or if you would like to interact with me, or if you'd like to add on or disagree with me, please feel free to do so. Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am. Thank you for that compelling and intellectually stimulating presentation. Your insights into this topic has given us much to reflect upon. And now we will open the floor for questions and discussion. Participants are welcome to share their thoughts or queries related to today's talk.
It need not be a doubt or a question. If you have anything to add or even disagree with, I would really like to hear that. Thank you.
Girls, would you like to ask any question? Because you're working on a translation project. Srilata madam and Sharon, I would like to proudly say here that we have a translation project on their syllabus actually. So like earlier we used to have a theory paper to complement this, but I think that has been replaced by some other paper. So this session would have been, really very useful. Like Srilata madam was able to give us the theory part of it, and Sharon was able to talk about the practice. So both were equally given importance in this session. I'm really happy that both of them, both the keynote speakers were able to talk about both the theory and the practice. So students would have really had a lot of takeaway from this session. Thank you. Friends, students, like PG students, like would you like to ask any question, any clarification? Because you are working on a project currently, isn't it? Any clarification or anything you would like to get it done by the keynote speakers, you are welcome. Okay, in that case, thank you very much, Srilata madam and Sharon, for presenting, all the very detailed this one description of all the aspects of translation related to both theory and practice. Sharon, wish you all the best for your research to get over as early as possible. So we are looking forward to that, and we would like to keep in touch with both the keynote speakers for future in tandem sessions as well. So I think we'll call it a day with Tawhida just closing it up, wrapping it up.
Okay, ma'am.
Yes.
As we conclude today's symposium, I extend my heartfelt gratitude to both our distinguished speakers for sharing their knowledge and perspectives. I also thank all participants for their presence and engagement. Let us continue to read, translate, and celebrate the diverse voices that shape our literary world. Once again, thank you all. Have a wonderful evening. Thank you.
I think Benita has posted a message.
Yeah,
Would you like to ask Benita? Would you like to clarify that, Benita?
Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am.
Yes.
Ma'am,
Yeah.
do you agree that one part women as the which reflects the pastoral reality?
thank you for the question, Benita. And it's a very interesting question. Pastoral, the very name connotes something idyllic, something that's serene and untroubled. And this idea of pastoral realism is something that I find paradoxical. And Perumal Murugan's works, even when he describes nature and even when he describes happy times, even the happy times between the husband and a wife in one part woman, it's colored with something darker, it's colored with something deeper. And there is always something, it's almost like danger is lurking right around the corner. And this idea of pastoral realism, I think it's a very apt coinage. I don't know if you have come up with that, but it's a very apt coinage because this idea of realism, which represents that things are not always as they seem, that they might be more embellished than they are in reality. And also this idea of pastoral, as in rustic or rural or off the countryside. I think it's a very apt coinage because even though his stories, one part woman in particular, even though it revolves around a seemingly happy couple, Ponna and Kali, and even though the landscape around them is very lush and it's full of the harvest, full of the bounties of the harvest, there is always something sinister even in their interactions and even in the nature surrounding them. The novel actually begins with the description of a portia tree, of a tree, but that tree, we find that it's sort of a metaphor. Without going very deeply into it, it's a metaphor for how the nature around us is something that we are manipulating and we are controlling. We decide where weeds should be and we decide where flowers should be. We decide whether a plot of land is to be used for harvesting or whether it can be left to the whims of nature. So we are in control at all times, and that creates a very insular and a world where that is very manipulated, that is fabricated according to our own preferences. So pastoral realism, I think that's a very apt coinage, and I do find pastoral realism in his works. I would like to hear your thoughts on it and whether you agree or if there is something else I have missed out on. Thank you
Okay.
for the question, Benita.
Benita is one of the faculty. Yes, in our department.
All right, nice to meet you,
Yes.
ma'am.
Okay, if there is no other query or any clarification to be made, shall we wind up? Yes.
Yes, ma'am.
So, Hita, with your closing remarks, we can wind up.
Once again, I would like to express my gratitude to both the speakers today. It was thought provoking and it was quite interesting as uh, we are working on our translation project. We could relate it uh, to the presentation. Thanks both the speakers. Thank you. Have a great evening.
Okay, thank you very much. Good night. Thank you, Tawhita, for pitching in.
Thank you, ma'am.